All right, this looks like a good crowd. Good morning. Thank you for joining me for The Sky is the Limit, Growing Your Business with Microsoft Dynamics CRM Online. It's been a really good year for CRM Online. Subscriber count has grown, revenue has grown, things have been looking great. In no small part to folks like you who've been helping drive people to the cloud, tell them about the benefits. This year we want to grow even more. How do we go about doing that? Well, there's a lot of questions that I personally get when I talk to partners, when I talk to customers about Dynamics CRM Online. I think the goal for today in this next hour is to answer some of those questions. So what might those be? Things like, who manages the data centers? Where is it hosted? What are you going to do with my data? How committed is Microsoft really? How's the experience resolving? What are you going to be doing to improve some of the issues we saw from last year? Well, let's start answering these questions. First off, who manages the service? Well, that would be my team. I'm Service Engineering Manager for CRM Online. Means I keep the lights on for thousands of machines in many data centers worldwide, or hosting the data and the services that our CRM Online customers are using. I've been at Microsoft 16 years or so. All of that time has been spent in and around online services of all kinds. Started out in consumer, working on MSN, Xbox, ads, and then shifted now into the business world to help manage CRM Online and ensure that we're delivering that type of scale and that type of quality for our business level customers. What we're going to cover today, again, to keep answering those questions, we're going to talk about the data center, the cloud infrastructure that Microsoft has invested in. We're going to talk about the integrity and reliability of the data that we are storing. We'll talk about security, compliance, managing the service, and all that goes into that, just so that when you're talking to customers, you can help build that confidence that Microsoft is a strong player, we're here to stay, and we're continuing to invest to make the cloud a great place to run your CRM system. So as you might have heard in the keynote session yesterday, Steve Ballmer mentioned billions of dollars of investment. Well, to date, it's over $3 billion that we've put into cloud infrastructure across Microsoft. And CRM, though a small part of that, is leveraging large components of that investment to ensure that we're getting the best systems, the best locations, the best environments overall to host this kind of data. We're not just investing dollars in facilities, we're investing dollars in hardware, best of breed. We're investing in networks, we're investing in people, over 2,000 people who are managing the servers in the cloud today, and 30,000 plus developers who are building these services that people are leveraging. Right now, in operational excellence, CRM explicitly is backed by a financial SLA, 99.9. And actually, I noticed earlier that there's an error on this slide, but I decided to leave it just to highlight a point. It says that we're currently at 99.5 actual uptime. That's not right. That was from many moons ago. This last couple of months, we've been 4 nines of availability, and we don't see any plan in that dropping whatsoever. Federated operating systems, operations centers, 24/7. One key thing that Microsoft has thought about as we're building up these data centers is not just more and more and more. It's also thinking about the carbon footprint of what we put out into the environment. Let's talk a little bit about our data center evolution. Way back when, 20 years ago, Microsoft has been investing in data centers for about 20 years now. We had what we called Generation 1. Now this was your old mainframe, huge buildings, long rows of servers, big HVAC systems and power systems to keep these things running, raised floors, the whole works. If you've been in a data center, an old style data center, you've seen this. Now, the way that we track the efficiency of our data centers is via PUE. That's power use effectiveness. What that is effectively a ratio between the power that's consumed by your compute resources and the overall power that's needed to run your data center environment. Way back when, you needed as much power to run your computers as you needed to power all the other support systems. That huge amounts of consumption. It's bad for the environment. It's bad all around. So in the last several years, we've been striving to build out new types of data centers that will give us much higher levels of efficiency, be able to pack more compute power into each individual data center, and just gain efficiencies all around. Generation 2, around 2007, higher rack density with the same level of cooling resources that we had in the past. Moving forward, Generation 3, this is where many of our data centers are at today, moving to containers and pods for how we manage them. They're pre-built, they're brought in, they're dropped down, still in these cases inside of a building, but each pod itself can manage its own airflow and its own cooling without the need for a huge HVAC style system. We've been able to drop the PUE down to 1.5 to 1.2, so close to the same amount. Generation 4, this is where Microsoft is heading right now. We have a couple of data centers that are meeting the spec, and we're slowly converting others over. In this case, we bring in what are called IT packs. We work with vendors to build out pre-stamped units that have all the servers we need lined up in exactly the right way, so you can drop it onto a floor somewhere, anywhere, even in the dirt for all it matters. Plug in network on one side, power from 2 locations just so you have redundancy, and you're off and running and ready to go with a whole new segment of compute power. This gets us down to almost 1-to-1 on power efficiency in this case. CRM is running out of one of these data centers today. Over the next few years, we will see that all the data centers that CRM is in will be running like this. Now that talks about how we think about the data center infrastructure from just a pure hardware and facilities perspective. We also take great pains to lock it down, to keep it secure. So it's not just locks on the front of the computer cases, locks on the front of the IT pack boxes. It's 2-factor auth to get into the buildings or get into the areas, the caged-in areas where these IT packs are stored. It's external perimeter security to make sure nobody can even get to the point where they could try to get at those locks. And then, of course, environmental hazard suppression, make sure that if there's a fire, if there's any other type of issue, that we've got it all covered. All extensively monitored. Cameras everywhere, big rooms full of monitors where people are making sure that nothing toward is going on inside of the system. Where are these at? Well, we've got an extensive network of Microsoft-owned data centers all over the world. Primary data centers for us in CRM happen to be in Virginia, Dublin, and Singapore. We also have sister data centers in each of those regions for our disaster recovery solution, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. We pick our locations where we build our data centers based on availability of network inflow, availability of local power, clean power options where we can get them. Right now, our East Coast data center is the premier data center built on this IT pack type of solution. In fact, we don't have a huge brick and mortar building there at all. It's effectively concrete base. Some of them are open air, where we just have dropped these down. They're inside a box, so it doesn't matter if there's a little bit of environmental rain or something else going on. They manage their own cooling just via airflow, no HVAC whatsoever. In some cases, we do have open air breezeways with a roof over them for certain types of resources that we are managing. But absolutely state-of-the-art data center infrastructure. So we've talked about the footprint, we've talked about where we're at, we've talked about the hardware itself. It's interesting. What people really want to hear about is their data. How do we think about it? How do we protect it? How do we make sure that what they've given to us is going to be protected, reliable, there whenever they need it? One, we at Microsoft take the data very, very seriously. We don't use it for advertising. We don't use it for mining or data mart. It is you or your customer's data. We treat it that way throughout. We want to make sure that no matter what happens, that data is available. It's got integrity, It's not going to disappear on you. We can always get you to a good state. In fact, you're always constantly in a good state. Two things we do here. One is local high availability for situations like a disk drive catching on fire or some other, more likely it just fails. Or disaster recovery for a much larger type of event, like a coast drops into the water. How do we make sure that we are resilient to these types of failures? Well, you have your primary copy of your database in whichever your primary data center is. That's your primary, that's where your transactions are going. You also have a synchronous secondary copy in that same data center. That means that transactions commit to both places before it's called good. So at any given point in time, just in the local data center, 2 good copies running. If one fails, instant fail over to the other, things keep chugging. We also have 2 asynchronous copies of that same data in an alternate data center across the US or across the region that you happen to be in. Now, that other data center is also the primary for another set of customers, and they have their asynchronous secondaries on your same data center. What that means is that both data centers in any given region are built out to support the full load of both sets of traffic as needed. So we've got double redundancy on everything, 4 copies of your data live at any given point in time. In addition to that, we're taking backups every 24 hours. Now, how often do we have to go to backups because of something that's gone on in our data center? Never. The times we end up having to go to backups is when you give support a call, your customer gives support a call and says, somebody accidentally bulk deleted a whole bunch of data that I really need. In which case, we can go back to the most previous backup, which is within that 24-hour period, to get you back to as close to good as possible. Now, failing over in a disaster recovery environment is actually a relatively simple operation. We've built some good tools around this, and we practice it on an annual basis to make sure that everything stays up to date and is functional. We decide if there's a reason to fail over, either something has failed or maybe something is going to happen. When Hurricane Sandy hit just recently, we proactively failed over to the other side just in case, to make sure that customers would experience no loss if the hurricane caused any issues on the East Coast. It didn't end up being a problem. We were able to fail back, and all continued to run smoothly. Highlights, just again, 4 copies of your data, 4 different locations, 2 local, 2 remote. Near real-time data replication, real-time locally, near real-time to your asynchronous. All sites are designed to work independently, so there's no reliance on the fact that the other data center has to be there in order for one to keep on working. Finally, it is active-active, as I mentioned. Both sides are hot and continuing to run. And we've built all of this on top of SQL 2012 always-on infrastructure. So this is common technology that's anybody could be using. We've just happened to build a very large build-out of this environment. In fact, I think as it stands right now, last I heard from the SQL team, we are the largest SQL 2012 always-on for DR environment in the world. Now, how many of you have been with CRM Online for a year? Good number of hands. You may recall that last year at this time, we were not in such a great state. We had service reliability issues, we had service performance issues, a lot of things were going on. We've doubled down investments in this space and have made a ton of service improvements, and I hope that you guys have seen the results of that. We'll talk about a few of those. First, global network. We've spent a lot of money on what we call dark fiber to go between our data centers. Now, this is effectively our own network that we send traffic across so that there will never be any floods, any type of externally driven factors that will cause our 2 data centers to be unable to communicate with each other. Additionally, we've done a lot of local work in Asia, particularly around Australia and New Zealand, to optimize network routes from there to our Singapore data center location. working with local ISPs, making sure that we've increased the bandwidth coming out of the region. Wherever we see an issue where customers are having real problems with performance that's outside of the core CRM service itself, we have a team at Microsoft who will go out and help optimize external factors to make things better. We've done investment in componentizing the CRM architecture, separating out the online components from what is the on-prem bits that get delivered to everybody else, such that we can be a bit more agile in how we go about deploying that componentry. It's also increased our quality control in that we can take it bit by bit, have a set of test cases, a set of unit tests that validate every component before it goes out into live production. That leads us into what we call quality gates. We've established a lot more checkpoints in the process of releasing software where the core R&D team has to sign off, along with us, on a variety of factors before it'll move to the next phase of the deployment process. We'll go through that in a little more detail in a bit. We do incremental rollouts. We never go big bang to the entire site at once. We'll do what we call, for lack of a better term, a canary process, where we'll try it on a small set of the machines, make sure that they're still singing, and then we'll move on and slowly roll out those updates to the rest of the environments. We've engineered a new network stamp that goes hand in hand with these IT packs that we were talking about, that optimize rack layouts, that optimize rack level redundancy to ensure that even if a portion of a rack fails, everything else will continue to run. We've updated the hardware that we're utilizing in each of these for higher processing power. We've optimized the disk layouts and the disk configurations for the best possible I/O. CRM is an insanely I/O dependent application. It's a huge hog in terms of needing to write to and get data from the disk. So everything we can do to tune how we access the disk is going to make CRM much more performant. Now, actually, as to that, not everybody is on that new stamp yet. We have about 20% of the CRM Online population right now is on this new stamp. By the time Orion ships in the fall, everybody will be migrated over to be on the new stamp hardware. Independent of that, we've doubled the memory on all of the SQL servers in the data center. We found that because of the disk I/O issues, keeping more in memory was giving us a much better performance boost. So we've done that and allocated a huge chunk of that memory to the SQL process itself. So we've seen like 75% reduction in SQL errors that are being produced. And I believe it was doubling of performance for any I/O-bound queries that are coming in from CRM itself. We release what we call out-of-band releases every month. We'll talk about the process for that. And what we do in those is we evaluate the types of errors that we're seeing in CRM Online, whether it be SQL errors, blocking, things that are causing customers grief, even if it's not escalated through support, but ones that we see popping up in the logs. And we go back with a dedicated set of development resources, fix those issues, and roll them out once a month. So we've got a continuous cycle of improvement of the core service that's going on. We've increased the async service stability. Not something that you necessarily notice unless you run a lot of workflows and see that they tend to be lagging and that your jobs aren't running, but we've spent a lot of time improving the efficiency and the stability of that process. And then I don't know if a few months back you noticed that provisioning was taking an exceedingly long time, in some cases up to 24 hours to get an org from provisioning Office 365 to up and running in CRM. We've done a boatload of investment. That's now, I believe, less than 4 minutes at the 75th percentile, less than 6 at the 90th percentile, and we've gotten a ton better. We're not done there yet, but tons of improvements around the provisioning process. We've also improved the way we think about just doing the processes. We've standardized on how and when we do security patching in the environments. We've standardized on how and when we do these out-of-band fixes. We've also leveraged the high availability infrastructure to its fullest, meaning that when we're doing these maintenances, you never go down. You may see maintenance notifications actually come through every so often, but you'll never actually see downtime from these because we're able to fail over to your secondary, do an upgrade, fail back, do the upgrade on the other side. The entire time your system is up and running, and you'll never notice the difference. Security and compliance. This is an area of big concerns. I get a lot of RFPs coming in asking about what do we do about this, how do we handle privacy, a lot of detailed questions. Well, Microsoft has published our Trust Center, which includes some base level details about the certifications we've acquired, how we treat the data that you've handed off to us. Again, we do respect privacy. We do believe the data belongs to you and your customers. Everything is independently verified. We've gone through third parties for a number of certifications that I'll talk to you about. And we want to be completely transparent about how we use your data. So please, if you've not gone to look at it, take a look at this link for the Trust Center and read about all the ways that Microsoft is ensuring that your data is yours, that it's secure, and that it's private. For our compliance program, we are ISO certified. We're SOC 1 Type 2 certified. We're in process of getting G-Cloud for the EU, in process of FISMA FedRAMP for North America. We've got HIPAA BAA clauses that we will sign for customers who request it, as well. EU model clauses, which we will add to EU contracts that are in addition to safe harbor in how we'll manage EU data and ensure that it is kept in the EU. Now, operations management. How do we actually run things day to day? What types of tasks do we do, and how do we go about doing it? Well, first and foremost, incident response is a primary concern for my team, and we're leveraging resources from top to bottom in Microsoft to get this done. Inside of the data center, you have a small set of personnel whose whole goal in life is to be available if something's going wrong in the hardware. They can run in, get into the cage, take out a hard drive, swap in another one, take out a whole machine, swap in a new machine, a blade, whatever's necessary to keep things running. Because of the redundancy, these guys can pretty much do their job on their own. When something looks like it's failing, they can just go get it done. The data center keeps on running. The only time we have to communicate with these guys is when a server's not responding remotely. We may need to go do a hard reboot on something. Again, we have the resources to be able to go do that locally on site. Next tier up, we use System Center to kick off self-healing type of operations for things that are well-known response issues. So we get an alert, System Center says, I know exactly what to do with that. It will take that, fire off a script, go through some automation, and hopefully fix the issue. If that doesn't work, an escalation will go up to what we call our Microsoft Operations Center. This is a 24/7 operation. It actually runs in multiple places in the world. They're constantly watching for these alerts and have a set of what we call TSGs or troubleshooting guides that they utilize to go manually try to fix things that the automation was unable to catch. Now, if that fails and they aren't able to go manually touch these things, then they'll escalate to my team. And site engineering will then do a deep dive to figure out what exactly is going on and how we're going to go about resolving the issue. For monitoring, we also use System Center as our primary console, the primary means of capturing this eventing data and alerting data. We've also built a series of health checks that we run against every server type in our environment, and this is, again, thousands of servers that we're running online. These health checks determine that both the machine is healthy as well as the CRM software that's running on that machine. In addition to that, we have outside-in monitoring from multiple endpoints for every region. So as close as we can get to simulating customer load from the outside to ensure that there's nothing going on in the interim that might be causing a customer grief. So, and we're tracking that, like I said, for multiple endpoints against every what we call scale group or unit of customer scale within the environment. For issue management, as I mentioned before, MOC is alerted on anything that comes up that wasn't able to be handled otherwise, and then escalation flows up to my team who digs in deeper. And when we talked about the quality gates earlier, these are the checkpoints we use to ensure that everything is coming together in the way it should be. Multiple environments, multiple means at which that we ensure that what's going to end up in production is going to be the highest quality possible. We have functional environments, which are effectively one-box virtual machines that the dev and test teams run. Anytime they make a code fix, they have a battery of tests that they do locally in order to pass to the next gate, a gauntlet, if you will. That moves on into what we call a test integration environment, which is a production-like environment, but run in our test labs by our test team. That's integrated with partner systems, and it ensures that not just the local components, but the end-to-end is going to work together and function well. Once we pass that quality gate, we have performance labs, where we're running a battery of micro tests on individual features, macro tests to validate load at a global scale to ensure that, again, nothing has impacted the performance. Sorry about that. Next is our integration environment. That's managed by my team. Think about that as pre-production. Everything in that environment is kept pristine, just like the production environment, and is always a mirror unless we're in the middle of rolling out new software, in which case pre-prod will get it a short time before production will get it. Finally, the production site. You know how that works. Next thing we've done is focus on the service experience. Now, this isn't the user experience, as you've seen a lot of changes coming out in Orion, but this is the service experience, how customers and partners think about the service experience, the communications you get, the means by which you get into the service, so on. So we've created a team called the Customer and Partner Experience Team within the service engineering organization. The purpose and life of this team is to effectively be the advocate for the customer and the partner. They're the voice from the outside saying, here's what's wrong, here's what's not working, both to keep us in check and make sure that we're thinking about and prioritizing things the right way, as well as communicating back out. I imagine you've seen a larger number of communications from the service recently about, hey, we know something's going on, we've got a maintenance coming down the pipe. Coming up, CDU for customer-driven upgrade, you'll see some comms about that. That all is driven by this team. Their goal is to be able to directly touch individual organizations that are impacted. So we've got it down to the point where when we're having a localized issue in the data center, we can quickly determine which organizations are impacted, and within 15 minutes, get an email out to administrators of those organizations saying, hey, we know there's an issue, we know something's going on, don't worry, we're working on it. Here's our ETA for the next comm, and here's our ETA for the resolution of the problem. Once the problem's done, they will follow up on that same communication to say, hey, everything's all good now, you should be back up and running, and then here's the location and the timeline for a post-incident report where you can go read more about what happened and how we're going to ensure that it doesn't happen again. Now, aside from the outbound communication, they also work in line with the inbound comms. So when an issue is occurring, customer support gets pulled in, as you can imagine. As things escalate through customer support, once they decide that there's a point at which they can no longer help the customer, they will then escalate to the CPX team, who then acts as the global triage and prioritization organization. They'll go through and make sure that, of all of the issues that we're working on, that we've got the right priorities in mind, and that we're tracking the issues that need to be tracked, and that customer is always coming first in how things are going on inside the org. Now, I don't know if you've seen the trial experience recently and the introduction of Test Drive. Has anybody seen this? Tried to sign up for a trial, you've gone through the Dynamics front page, you've gotten this kind of click-through test drive experience prior to getting into the trial. This is something we've introduced recently as a test to see, one, what kind of people are coming in the front end, help educate people a little bit before we drop them into a trial experience that can be somewhat frightening for someone who hasn't worked with a CRM system before. Improve the qualification process. Make sure that people who are getting into the trial process are people who are committed. They like what they see, they want to take the next step and move in further. Now, this is not done by any means. We're running it as a trial right now in the US and the UK. We're collecting a boatload of data about the type of people that are flowing through, the conversion rates, how they're using the system, and we'll be determining how to take this forward as we move ahead. The experience flow, you come in through the marketing portal, you do some basic self-selection. You say how big your company is, whether you're interested in sales or marketing, which aspects of the service, and then it takes you through a customized flow that aids you in figuring out how best to leverage the CRM system, and then gives you the link where you can sign up for the trial. Now, the single biggest bit of feedback that we have received across the board for our last rollout, Polaris release in January and February, was that people went to bed at night, woke up the next morning, and holy cow, they got a new software release. Some of their customizations weren't working, things had changed, new features had appeared, and this was not a good thing. So what we've done is reintroduced what we call customer-driven upgrade back for the Orion release. What this means is that customer drives when and how their organizations get updated. We will do a pre-scheduling process, and in fact, in the next couple of weeks, you will be getting a communication about your orgs that says, you've been pre-scheduled for upgrade during this time window. We've given you a secondary window of this other date. If you don't like either of those dates, there's an admin UI option for you can go and pick another date for your org to transition within the window that we've specified. Right now, that's a 90-day period. Given feedback, and I'd love to hear your feedback on timing, we could play with that time a little bit. The other thing that we've done here is ensure that notifications are going to be common and consistent throughout this process. So you'll never be left wondering, is the upgrade happening? When is it going to happen? There will be consistent notifications at 90 days, 45 days, 7 days, making sure that all the way up till the process, you're being kept in the loop when your organization starts to upgrade, when it's completed upgrading successfully, or if there had been some issue in the middle, the fact that we have rolled you back and that we will schedule you again and for what date that has been scheduled. Now, I would suggest you leverage this by scheduling any dev, test, UAT type of organizations early in the cycle so that you can test your customizations, make sure that everything's working well, and then your production orgs at the tail end of the cycle so that you have time to get your updates in, post them to online, and then let the upgrade happen as it will. Now, all this culminates back into our commitment as Microsoft back to you and your customers. We want to make sure that you understand enough about how we run the online service that you can explain it to your customer base, that there are no open questions about, I'm not quite sure, I don't know how online works, I don't know that they're going to handle my data well. Anything that you need to know in order to help your partner or help your customer get on board, you should know. And that's why we're here. We want to make sure that IT is invisible, that things just run. We've done a lot of work, as you've seen, throughout the process to ensure that there's no reason at all that things should go down for extended periods of time. You might see little blips on the radar, but they should be just that. They should just be blips. Maintenance happening without downtime. We've been doing that for several months now. It's been very successful. Increased communications so that even though you're not seeing it in the service, you're hearing about it, you know what's going on. You always have that comfort level that we're there and we've got your back. Quality is improving, continually pushing the quality upstream so that at every point in the cycle, there's a checkpoint. There's somebody looking at it and ensuring that when it hits production, it's going to be the best possible quality that it can be. Agility, making sure that You have control over when your organizations update. It's not just us pushing things at you. It's you being able to make that call for yourself or your customers. Introducing dev and test instances such that you can validate things in production before they move on. And then finally, just ensuring that we've built the right level of trust all around. We've got a set of cloud service principles internal that we use to make sure that our developers, our testers, our program managers, everybody's thinking about the cloud in the right way. That all leads towards building that right level of trust. Overall vision, focus first on the customer. Good first run experience. Lead them into the process. Help them understand what they're going to be getting into. Easy to onboard. We want to make sure that they can get into the system and start using it quickly and efficiently. We want to understand more and more about the customer, collect more telemetry. One thing you'll see coming down the pipe in the future, particularly for our larger and enterprise customers, is a report back on usage and statistics about how they're utilizing the service, about their specific uptime, not the global uptime. More and more data about what's going on in the system, just continuing to open up and share more and more. More self-service. Right now, backup and restore has to come through customer support. Introducing more features such that customer has control over when and how to snapshot, when to be able to restore a snapshot, when to be able to get a copy of that backup for themselves. Then again, invisible may be the wrong term for how you think about IT. You don't want it to just completely disappear, but you want it to be your friend, not your enemy. Finally, in the service itself, high performant, very resilient, compliant, and all up. I shouldn't have to think about it day in, day out. The system should just run. And that's our final goal for Dynamics CRM Online. And that is what I have. I'm very happy to take questions now. I also have an interactive session this afternoon, a much smaller venue, but very open to having deeper discussions about the online service and answering any questions at all you might have in that venue as well. We have some mics, so if you've got questions now, feel free to pop up there, catch me after, catch me in the interactive. Otherwise, thank you very much. Be sure to fill out your comments. Oh, question. Very good.
It's great to see all those improvements. Thank you very much. But what we were wondering, is there also plans for allowing database access or swapping databases, providing the service that people can ask to change a database from one environment to the other?
There are currently no plans for that. In fact, the philosophy is it should be completely invisible to you, right?
Okay.
It shouldn't matter whether there's 1, 2, 5, 27 databases that we have. In the fullness of time, as we start to leverage Azure more and more, as we get into more dynamically scaling type of resource base, it should matter much less even.
But I actually meant it a little bit different. What my customers want is to have the data of their production environment copied to the data of their test environment.
Gotcha. In which case, yes. It is in the planning process. It's not something that's coming out in this fall release, but it is something we are looking at for the next one down the pipe.
Okay, great to hear. Thank you.
Other questions? Quiet bunch. So online is perfect. That's good to know. Okay, do please fill out your evaluations. Let us know what you think about the sessions. One other thing I did want to talk about is at the end of this month, there will be a training blitz day. You can sign up through PartnerSource. That will give you deep training on all the new Orion features that are coming out in this next rev. You will have access to technical resources through that process as well, where you can ask deeper questions to Microsoft about what's coming in that next release. Thank you much. Appreciate it.